so much on the line, candidates are making their last push just to make sure you get out and vote.
Yeah, huge issues are putting our state at the center of a national conversation: immigration, healthcare, and of course, education funding.
Yeah, and tonight our own Steve Irvin following that debate for us from Chandler.
Steve, explain how this election could really shape education for years to come in our state.
Well, Faye, many educators will tell you that this is a real tipping point for the future of education. What we saw back in April, tens of thousands of educators rallying outside of the state capitol. A lot of that the result of education funding cuts, which go back more than a decade. Now, the governor and state lawmakers argue they have reversed that trend with initiatives like Prop 123 and a teacher pay raise. Teachers say it's really not enough, that we still don't match funding for the national average, and that there's still a huge teacher shortage in our schools. As a result, many polls show that education is still top of mind for voters, and certainly in the governor's race and legislative races we see that to be true. The Red for Ed movement, of course, one of the driving forces behind all of this. Teachers rallying for more pay and more funding for schools, but they were also dealt a major blow back in August when the state Supreme Court knocked the Invest in Ed initiative off the ballot. So where does the movement go from here? ABC 15's Mike Pelton has been talking with Red for Ed leaders about their next step.
Well, Steve, one of the organizers of Red for Ed tells me the movement isn't over, it's evolving. At one point, we saw thousands of teachers rallying right here outside the state legislature. They are now trying to get candidates they support inside of it.
There's not as much noise, but in some ways, Red for Ed is back where we've seen them before, at the state legislature.
I don't think this is going to do anything except grow. There's going to be increased accountability and pressure on legislators.
Joe Thomas is the Arizona Education Association president and one of the most vocal organizers of Red for Ed, which saw teachers walk out of classrooms and march on the state capitol until a state budget passed designed to give teachers a raise. But in an effort to get more funding for Arizona schools, Red for Ed morphed into Invest in Ed. But that tax proposal kicked off the ballot as the state Supreme Court ruled it contained confusing language.
There have been a lot of challenges along the way. And remember, this is 10 years. 10 years of waiting for the legislature to act.
Despite the hurdles, Thomas tells me the focus now is on supporting candidates for the state legislature that they deem are pro-education, including some teachers now running for office.
We're looking at the Senate, we're looking at the House, we need to pick up a chamber, and we're looking at the governor, and that still can happen. There's a lot of issues out there.
While Thomas hopes Red for Ed's candidates of choice win big next Tuesday, he says the movement moves forward no matter what. But he can't take another walkout completely off the table in an effort to improve Arizona schools.
We wish we could do that in the election, which is what we're trying to do. We want to do that through the traditional means. But if the only way the legislature and a governor will listen to us is if we step out of our classrooms temporarily so we can come back permanently with more permanent funding, then I think educators are ready to take that risk.
Now, as if you'd expect him to say anything else, Joe Thomas tells me he is confident Election Day will go well for Red for Ed. But if it doesn't, he tells me the movement won't end, but it would adjust. So a lot of what Red for Ed looks like as a movement in the long term really depends on what happens next Tuesday. Back to you, Steve.
Thanks so much, Mike. And with the education debate, there's also a lot of talk about the privatization of schools in our state. We've seen the expansion of private school vouchers, and we've also seen the growth of privately run charter schools. And now there's a measure to actually help make them more accessible and easier to get into. ABC 15's Sonu Wasu joining us now with more on that and more on where these education dollars are really being spent. Sonu?
Yeah, hi, Steve. That has always been the big question. How are these education dollars being spent? And now we've got candidates on both sides of the aisle, Democrat and Republican, calling for change, ready to work with the Arizona Charter Schools Association on this call for reform and transparency.
There's very little transparency, and people are becoming millionaires off of our students.
From the state's largest teachers association to students and families.
We don't know how much they spend on salaries. It's all pretty much kept in secret.
There's a renewed urgency and a call for the hundreds of charter schools in Arizona to report their finances to the public. After all, they are getting money from state taxpayers.
I was a school principal for 23 years, and we we counted every penny, and we had to keep track of candy bars that were sold at basketball games.
Public schools have to report their finances, so advocates like Jim Hall, who founded Arizonans for Charter Schools Accountability, say it's only fair that charter schools funded by taxpayer money should do the same. When it comes to the election, transparency and school choice have become talking points in the race for governor.
I'm for more choice. David's for less choice. And I want to see more choice for our parents. I want parents to be able to send their children to the school that they would like to send them to.
One of the things that I believe the legislature has gotten very wrong is they believe that only parents who have taken their children out of traditional public schools in some way have made a choice.
Now we are hearing both candidates agree charter schools should report their finances to the public. Taxpayers have a right to know how much of our money is being spent on students versus administrative salaries. These are things, Hall says, his organization has been fighting for years.
As it stands now, we've never had a charter bill read in committee. Both committee chairpersons are tied to the charter industry, and we never hear anything about the bills.
Now, we reached out to the Charter School Association for a comment on this story. We were told they're not going to be available to talk to us today, but I did check on their website, and we did see the president there state that she is also agreeing with this on this call for reform and transparency and ready to work with the state. Reporting live, Sonu Basu, ABC 15, Arizona.
Charter school reform, a big issue that is expected to come up in the state legislature. Of course, we're still seeing many of these Red for Ed supporters out in small protests all around the state and all around the valley as well. With a week to go before elections, of course, a lot of people have already cast their ballots, but they're still going after those handful of undecided voters. Guys?
Yeah, certainly an important issue for a lot of voters here in Arizona. Steve, thank you.